Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Hurdy Burke Internet Broadcast Network. We are on the Power Hour broadcast with Danny L. Smith. If you want to check out the Facebook group, just do a search for Power Hour Broadcast, Danny L. Smith. And thank you guys for listening to the past shows and hope you're enjoying them. Tonight, we're going to talk about Adam Grant's book, Givers and Takers, The Surprising Truth About Who Gets Ahead. And Danny, I know you love this subject, so dive in, and I'll be listening in, and hopefully I can interrupt you at some point during the broadcast, okay?
The book, Give and Take, A Revolutionary Approach to Success by Adam Grant. I was actually wondering where I came up with this book here a few weeks ago, and what caused me to – I actually started listening to it on Audible during some walks a while back. Now, and I thought I had come across this book as a recommendation from Michael Mayer and his a class I was taking for him. Had read his book again recently, 7 L's, 7 Levels of Communication. But I figured out today, going through some notes in prep for this tonight, that I was actually reading something from Daniel Pink. And Daniel Pink is another author. He got to talk some stuff I was listening to and reading. It was Daniel Pink that had this on his quote-unquote bookshelf. So we're actually going to cover a couple of things that Pink covers next week. We're actually going to cover about why givers often succeed, of course, a certain type of giver. So here's the premise, and this is pretty much how Grant starts the book off. He starts off by saying, he gives a little introduction. He's done a massive amount of study over the last few years at Wharton Business School. He's a professor there. He has studied successful people, and he's divided them into 3 categories: most successful, least successful. That's the top third and the bottom third, the middle third. What categories of people make that up? And he ended up finding out something much different than what he started off with. He found out, oh, by the way, when I said he has studied successful people, this is a wide range of professions, from doctors, attorneys, to salespeople, to teachers, even certain category of actors, screenwriters,
marketing consultants.
He has it just and let's get it out on the table. He's talking about success meaning that you're moving up the ladder and or making more, you're making more money and you like it. Okay, so I don't want to get people weird. Yeah, but given your definition of success, there's different definitions of success. This is laid out there. We're talking about success, money, and satisfaction. Okay? And here's what he said. The bottom third of successful people, and this is how he starts the book off, the bottom third of successful people are givers. But what's surprising is the top third are also givers. They're just a different type of giver. The middle are takers and matchers. So he's got 3 categories of people: givers, takers, and matchers. The top third and the bottom third are givers. The middle third are takers and matchers. The difference between the givers that succeed and the givers that don't succeed, the givers that don't succeed, I'm putting this into my words, they wear themselves out giving. They don't look out for themselves, and they just get wore out. The top third, those givers, they never lose sight. You might say they're, and I think he does say somewhere that they're ambitious. Now, he has defined a term for those that he calls otherish, and we'll get into that here in a few minutes. But, Purdy?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm going to throw it back on you. What do you think about that?
It's true. I mean, this is the first time, I mean, we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks. You've been reading the book, but this is like the first time I read over the material before you got on the phone tonight, and I'm sitting there going, wow, okay, wow, more wow. It makes sense after you read it. You know what I'm saying? It's like hindsight. You don't really get it till you start reading it. Then you can kind of get a picture of what you are in this group. So I'm be interested to see what you have to say. Tossing it back to you.
Okay, yeah. Think about what a lot of the people listening to this, they're on the call now. Those that are on they'll be listening to the podcast. Many of them are quote unquote networkers. They're going out and meeting people face to face.
Yep.
With the intention of building a relationship and or selling and or marketing. So, I don't want to group all networkers. There's sales and marketing. There's different types of sales and marketing. There's sales and marketing that is I was talking to a gentleman this morning, and he's a financial planner. And the company he works for, he's told to get out on the streets and meet people. A company that another guy I know works for, if they get out on the street much, other than what we used to call highball lunches, they're criticized because they need to be on the phone smiling and dialing, and they're prospecting. I've got a book over here from Sandler Sales, and it's about a lot of it is about smiling and dialing. You're calling. I know loan officers. That's what they do. They call 40 to 100 realtors a week looking for a loan. And so that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is people that are around other people face to face. They're on the phone with them as a follow through. We just had Stop Wasting Handshakes for Networkers a training a couple of weeks ago. And a lot of people that are listening to this podcast come through those programs either recently or in the past. And this book talks directly to those that want to build a network of relationships. Here's a statement. If you insist on quid pro quo every time you help others, you will have a much narrower network. Called somebody today who I know is a heavy networker, asked him what he thought about that, and he said, I don't like it. What are you talking about? And I said, well, what don't you like about it? He says, well, when I give somebody a referral, I'm expecting a referral back. I said, okay. I said, and he said, what do you read? And I said, and I said, how do you know I'm reading something? Well, you're always reading something. Well, what are you talking about here? And I told him a little bit about it, the background on it, and he was kind of like, really? So we spent about 15 minutes discussing his network. And you know what? His network is tightly. Now we've been talking a little bit that his network, he is trying to expand it. But right now his network is tightly connected to his BNI group. And that got us into a discussion that BNI is primarily about matching. I'm going to be exploring that with a few more BNI people here in the coming days and weeks. But that's primarily from what my experience with BNI. I haven't been in a BNI group in about 3 years, but it's about give and take. It's about reciprocity. Okay, you give and you get, and anyway, that's a it's hard to think. Now, this guy did start backing up a little bit. We went through some examples of, I was going to go through that, but I don't think I'm going to do it tonight. But some examples of when you give and you don't expect to get back. But out on the streets, I've been guilty of it. I've been guilty of not, I don't think I've been guilty of not giving, but I've been guilty of moving away from giving because it seemed like in that arena that I gave a lot wasn't getting. But I think that is okay if I'm understanding what I've been reading the past few weeks. It's been going on for about, I guess, 2 months, 3 months, a little over 2 months since I started listening to the book and then bought the book. So here's something. Givers don't wait for signs of potential. Because they tend to be trusting and optimistic about other people's intentions in their roles as leaders, managers, and mentors, givers are inclined to see the potential in everyone. By default, givers start by viewing people as bloomers. Thought about in Speed of Trust, Stephen M.R. Covey says that we have to have a propensity to trust. Now, going on in the book here and just highlighting some things. For many years, psychologists believed that in any domain, success depended on talent first and motivation second. To groom world-class athletes and musicians, experts looked for people with the right raw abilities and then sought to motivate them. But in recent years, psychologists have come to believe that this approach may be backward. Interest is what drives people to invest their time and energy in developing particular skills and bases of knowledge. Today, we have compelling evidence that interest precedes the development of talent. It turns out that motivation is the reason people develop talent in the first place. A little bit different tack there from I just realized I'm in a different part of the book here, but he gets into another thought process here. But the last 3-4 weeks we've talked about everyone communicates, few connect. This book, to prove that, this book is a great proof of that point from Maxwell's book, that takers just communicate and get what they can. We see people like that come into networking meetings. Some of them haven't been taught how to network. Some have been taught but refuse to ignore the fact that you don't just walk in and start giving everybody business cards. That is a major turnoff. So back to Daniel Pink, in his book, In to Sell is Human, Pink argues that our success depends heavily on our influence skills. Goes back to Maxwell's point about connecting. Influence, we communicate in communication, we don't necessarily influence in the right way all the time. We communicate to influence, but we only truly influence when we connect. Pink goes on to say, convince others to buy our products, to use our products, accept our ideas, and invest in us. We need to communicate in ways that persuade and motivate. But the best method for influence may not be the one that first comes to mind. Research suggests that there are two fundamental paths to influence. One is establishing dominance. Now, he gets on into this right here, and I see a lot of people that try to dominate conversations. They try to dominate the room. To establish dominance, takers specialize in powerful communication by speaking forcibly, raising their voices, like I'm doing now, to assert their authority, expressing certainty to project confidence, promoting their accomplishments, selling with conviction and pride, and a few more, like raising their eyebrows and challenge. You say something, you challenge. Talking to someone this morning, and he asked me, and I said, and I answered him, and he said, well, I agree with that. And I said, well, wait a minute. Why did you ask me? Were you asking me you're trying to validate something that you've got going on, or you're thinking? He says, no, I just wanted to know. I said, why do you have to agree or disagree? Now, this is somebody I can lovingly challenge this way. And he goes, well, why wouldn't I say that? I said, well, what if you didn't agree? He says, then I wouldn't. I said, why ask me? If it's not going to, it's a sign of an educated mind that can consider somebody else's view without having to own it. What if we disagreed and I was right? That whole thought process, but anyway, gets here, the raising their eyebrows and challenge. Got off onto a path there, didn't I? The opposite of Taker's powerful communication style is called powerless communication. Powerless communicators tend to speak less assertively, expressing plenty of doubt, rely heavily on advice from others, talk in ways that signal that they're vulnerable. They reveal their weaknesses and make use of disclaimers, hedges, and hesitations. It turns out, now I'm quoting here from Grant, it turns out that Taker's style doesn't always serve us well, and givers instinctively adopt a powerless communication style that proves surprisingly effective in building prestige. And he goes on here, and we're going to, hold on a second, I lost my screen. Here we go, got it back. Moving into selling. To effectively influence people, we need to convert the respect that we earn into a reason for our audiences to change. That might be an audience of one, to change their attitudes and behaviors. Asking questions is key. It's the givers, by virtue of their interest in getting to know us, who ask us these questions that enable us to experience the joy of learning from ourselves. I get that. It's the givers, by virtue of their interest in getting to know us, who ask us the questions that enable us to experience the joy of learning from ourselves. Now, what's interesting, I did not have that highlighted, but just kind of found myself reading that, so I'm now highlighting it. I missed that before. So you ask me questions, the better the questions you're asking me, and you're listening to my answers. So I'm saying, Herdy, you're asking me questions. You're listening to my answers, asking me more questions, and then that's causing me, he's saying here, to experience the joy of learning from myself through my answers. I've heard John Maxwell. I've been on a conference call with John, and somebody asked him a question, and basically they're asking for advice and his opinion about something, and he answers it. And I've heard Paul Martinelli, a couple of others that have known him for years go, John, I've never heard you say that before. And John says, I don't know. I don't think I even knew that. He said, this is pretty cool. And now John is one of the questions that he asks people are phenomenal. He sits down with you, and you better be prepared to learn more about yourself, because he is just nice and respectful, but asking questions. And if you're there for a very long time, they're ongoing. And anyway, by asking questions, givers build trust and gain knowledge about their customers' needs. Over time, this makes them better and better at selling. Givers tend to use more powerful speech, talking with tentative markers like, this is pretty interesting. Givers, they use powerless speak. Let me go back to takers. Takers tend to use powerful speech. They're assertive and direct. Now, this one here, I had to reread this numerous times. So givers tend to use more powerless speech. They talk with tentative markers like these. Hesitations. Well, you know. Hedges, as in kind of, sort of, maybe, probably, I think. Disclaimers, this may be a bad idea, but tag questions, they're interesting, or that's interesting, isn't it? That's a good idea, right? Intensifiers, really, very, and quiet. Now, all of that, using words like, well, no, kind of, sort of, maybe, probably, I think. This may be a bad idea, but this is interesting, isn't it? Using stuff like that is what he calls powerless speech that genders tend to use. Talking tentatively doesn't establish dominance, but it ears plenty of prestige. To a taker, this receptivity to advise may sound like a weakness. By listening to other people's suggestions, givers end up being unduly influenced by their colleagues. But what if seeking advice is actually a strategy for influencing other people? When givers sit down at the bargaining table, they benefit from advice in unexpected ways. He goes in here talking about some negotiations, and in the book he has some very powerful case studies, some people that he's followed for years and gone back to, and so very, very well worth the read and or the Audible to listen to. So motivational maintenance. Successful givers, it turns out, are just as ambitious as takers and matchers. There are two types of givers. And we're gonna end with this here, Herdy.
Okay.
But selfless givers are people with high other interest and low self-interest. In other words, a selfless giver versus a successful giver. Okay, a selfless giver has high other interest but low self-interest. They give their time and energy without regard for their own needs, and they pay a price for it. Successful givers, and I love this word. It's taken me a while to get used to it and to even get a good definition of it. Successful givers are otherish. And I'm outside the book right now. I don't believe he defines it like this, but looking through some different summaries and such, this is and actually there's a couple of interviews I've got here that people have interviewed Grant. And a person that's otherish cares about benefiting others, but they also have ambitious goals for advancing their own interests. Being otherish means being willing to give more than you receive, but still keeping your own interests in sight, using them as a guide for choosing when, where, how, and to whom you give. I don't care who you are. This is some good stuff.
So where do you sign up for the 12-step group?
Yeah, Hardy, I thought about you big time.
I mean, it sounds like it sounds a lot like codependency, you know? I mean,
yeah. What's that?
The whole premise is when you're giving, it might be because you're so broke you have to give, and you just feel like you need to make it up fast, or you get to a point where you're the right kind of giver. So here's my math equation: a giver is greater than a taker, but let's see. A giver is greater than a taker, but less than, and a taker is less than a giver. How's that?
Yeah, chase that rabbit for a few hours.
Chase that around the hill for a while.
Yeah.
Very interesting stuff.
Let me go ahead and let me throw this out here. Okay, you talk about the 12-step. It made me think about Celebrate Recovery, about recovering from hurts, habits, and hang-ups.
Right.
As a giver, you need to recognize that some people operate like takers. They're so self-focused that they will take what they can and move on. Be systematic in how you help other people. Pay more attention to who is asking. Pay attention to how they treat you. Make a list of reasons to say no.
That's perfect. You know what I heard?
Got a lot of stuff here to cover. What's that?
You know what I heard one time? If you can't say a no, you can't hear a no. That deep?
I agree with that. I don't know if I agree with that.
Well, that's okay. We'll discuss that for an hour off topic.
Yeah.
My point is that if you're not used to getting a no, then it's hard to hear a no. In other words, if you can't say no, then you can't say. Then
okay.
You see what I'm
somebody? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So in this. Okay. So in other words,
if you can't hear a no, you can't say no. That would seem like to me to be in line with this at some point. To figure out where to put it in the definition is if you're always used to saying yes to stuff, then it's going to be hard for you to say no to the right stuff.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Well, we'll ponder that.
I get it. Yeah, I'm gonna ponder that one.
This is interesting.
We've got some other stuff to cover. Next week.
Yep, next week.
We're going to cover, I think, there's some other stuff we could cover, but there's also, I've got some stuff out of an interview, which are the 5 questions why givers often succeed. And the 5 questions that Daniel Pink asks Adam Grant. Super. All right, Hardy. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Good information. That's deep topics, and trying to figure out where one stands. That's the challenge, and I like that. At least it gives you some benchmarks to figure out where you're at. I like that.
Yeah, it makes you kind of sit back and, some people I've talked to the past few weeks exploring this. If any of those have listened or are listening or will listen to this, but they're going to know where I was coming from, because we all know takers and we know some givers. Most of us think more like we should be, especially those of us that are networkers, that we should be. It should be a give and take. It's the matcher thing. But
yep.
Look forward to some one-on-ones talking about this, Hardy. Thank you, sir.
All right. Have a good evening, everybody, and thanks for listening, folks. Okay.
All right. See you, Hardy.
Good night.